let's move on. So I think I can say that the projective part of the comps is going to be mostly theory of projection and like limitations, strengths and weaknesses, and the TAT. So I'll probably go a little bit quicker through the rest of them. It's important that you know that they exist, what is unique about them, but not so much into interpretation and stuff. So the TAT, as I mentioned, has a lot of limitations. It has a lot of strengths and studies, but it tends to not be so great for children, just because of the way it was made. Also, it's all very old, like sort of pictures. It's old. The pictures seem antiquated. They're in black and white, and they all have, white people. So it's not necessarily very culturally appropriate. So there are different other projective measures that are better for children, especially children of color or even children that were not born in the 20s and 30s. So we'll go over those. The Roberts 2. The original Roberts was seen as a projective test. The Roberts 2, it's very carefully said, like, this is not a test. Because there's no, because of the things that we mentioned already. But it actually has norms. It has a scoring sheet. It has different decent psychometric properties. The norms are for ages 6 to 18. If you're not using norms, you probably stretch that a little bit. The other thing that's important is it has different cards for Caucasian, Hispanic, and Black populations. So essentially, and what changes is only the drawings. So it's the same scenes, but the races of the people there change, right? There are 16 cards. The administration procedure is to administer all of them. The Roberts 2, usually the pictures reflect a high press, so it has very easily distinguished social demands. It's a little more clear, easier for children to do it. And it has like a comprehensive scoring system, which you don't need to know, but know that it's there. Usually it's actually fairly ambiguous, at least compared with the TEMAS, and it has all interpersonal scenes that would be applicable for children. It uses, expressive language skills. That's another way of saying the response format is oral. And it measures the developmental function, so where the child is developmentally, as well as the clinical function. Are there any problems or things going on? Not going to go into a lot of detail, but based on the manual, these are, they actually have scales. So I don't know, considering all of this, why they don't call it a test, but they don't. So there are general themes, there's a popular poll that there's every card has a typical theme that goes onto it, and then there's more meaning, and it looks at available resources in terms of other people and themselves, how they can deal with problems, how they resolve the problems, emotions, and outcomes. Really not all that different from the TAT when based on what I presented before. In this case, though, it just has very clear, these are scales, and that you can compare it with norms. TEMAS, so tell me a story. Used for children ages 5 to 18. It also has a scoring system, and it has norms. And I actually really like the TEMAS for children. It has two different forms. It has the standard one, which is, again, all white children. And it has then a minority version, which has, all minorities together, because that's also appropriate. But it's better than, not having that. So, for instance, if you want to give a storytelling projective task to an Asian American child, well, you can't really give the Roberts because the Roberts has 3 categories, and Asian Americans or Asians are not one of them. So you probably want to do this one. Wow. Oh, no, this is right. It's so that I like it because they have the scenes are a lot more concrete than the Roberts, and it depicts urban scenes that children are more likely to relate to. And I would recommend that you take some time and just look at the types of cards just to get a sense for the test is. Has anyone administered the Roberts? Roberts 2? What about the TEMAS? So, I mean, I would just look at them. It should take, like, a couple minutes. And they have both of these in the library. So, like, for instance, there's a card where, it's divided in half. And in one of them, it's a bunch of, like, adolescents that are stealing a bike. And then on the other side, it's a bunch of people building a bike. And it's very clear what's going on, and but it's very open in terms of how a child wants to use that scene. It's useful for assessing strengths and weaknesses, not just psychopathology, just because it has a lot more positive interactions in them. And the manual says it measures cognitive, affective, interpersonal, and intrapersonal functions. There are 23 different pictures. The manual says give all of them. I don't think I've ever met anyone that gives all 23. There's a 9-picture short form with these cards. As you can see, there are some that are for boys and some that are for girls. If it doesn't say B or G, it means they're for both. So again, you can see how both the Roberts and this one, they tend to take a lot from the TAT and how it's structured. The themes, so it's most of what we talked about in terms of the theory and the basic conceptions between the TAT, you could also apply to this. The TEMAS, it's considered to measure dynamic cognitive functions. So it measures cognitive functions, personality functions, and affective functions. As you can see, again, this seems pretty repetitive because it's still a projective storytelling task and it measures the same things. The manual specifically says that this one has certain differences from the TAT. Whereas the TAT focuses only on intrapsychic dynamics, the TEMAS follows more on personality and internalized interpersonal representations. So the scenes are a lot more social, sometimes pro-social, or sometimes more conflict-related, but it pulls for more of an assessment of how people have internalized objects. Again, not that the TAT doesn't, but the TEMAS has more of a pull for that. It also uses color, which is nice. Yeah, even the Roberts doesn't use color, but the TEMAS does. So we talked about projectives as being an ambiguous stimuli. And so you don't know what's going on, and you project onto it. The TEMAS actually doesn't use... the stimuli isn't ambiguous, and I alluded to this. The scenes are very clear. What the scenes are pulling for is very clear. So why is it useful? Oftentimes, like in the example I gave for the one about the bicycle, 2 different scenes are depicted at the same time. So it uses a bipolar personality function, so it conceptualizes personality in terms of different extremes, and they're both presented, and it's about how the child will integrate those 2, choose one or the other, and focuses more on conflict resolution, which I think in general is one of the most useful things to look at. So whereas the TAT listens for negative responses, so you're looking for problems, the TEMAS actually looks at polarity, so they have a choice.
This seems like it would be a question on the prelim, comparing contrasting tests within a question. Is that something that you think could arise? I mean, regardless of whether it's between projective tests or not, but just being aware of differences so that we can be prepared to answer a question like that if it was asked?
Yeah, the question was whether or not it'll be likely that something like comparing and contrasting different tests are going to be in the comps. Definitely. And you don't necessarily have to know exactly what are the differences, just know I think it's more useful to think about it what do you need to know about the TEMAS? And part of that is, what's unique about it is that it's in color, and that it uses this bipolar personality functions, and so that you can use that if you have to compare and contrast. But that's definitely the types of questions that they'll be looking at, because they pull for a more in-depth knowledge about test usage and what test you would use. Mm-hmm.
Do we have to know when it originated, who developed it?
Not for this one, just for the TAT.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. So then we're done with projective storytelling. Yay. So we'll look at some of the other ones. So the Rotter incomplete sentence is blank. I love this one. It takes 5 minutes to administer, and it can give you so much information. It's a sentence completion test. So it has 2 sides, and it just has different part sentences. So the example I used before is a mother, blank, or other people, blank, women, blank, and you just give it to them. You don't have to give the instructions are there, and it's try to answer as many of these as you can, go as quickly as you can, and express your true feelings. Again, it can pull for a lot of sort of latent meaning, but it's a lot more overt in terms of if people don't want to show a certain part of themselves, it's very easy for them to hide it. But also, sometimes you can get a lot. You can get a lot from which questions were unanswered, and are there particular themes? Is it that all the themes, every time there's a question about somebody of a particular gender, it's very negative? So it's useful. It's usually added on as a complement. It's not as copyright protected, so you can actually copy the sentences and use those as an example. Anyway, there are 3 different forms for the RISB. There's a high school form, a college form, and an adult form. The reason being, sometimes it's going to be different in terms of the beginning of the question. For instance, an adult form will ask about jobs, whereas a high school and college form will ask about classes, in order to make it appropriate. There's no child version of the RISB. There are there's, for instance, the children's incomplete sentences, but it's essentially the same thing. It's a good complement for other things, other tests, and as I said, it's important it's useful to know which ones they have a hard time with. I often have a blank form, and I write they took a lot more time on this one, or looking at the ones they didn't endorse. That's as useful as seeing what they actually wrote. Questions on the RISB? Okay, so now we're going to go on to projective drawings. Some people love drawings, some people hate drawings. There are tons and tons of books about what different things mean. There's nothing really all that conclusive based on what I've heard. You can get gigantic books about, if they draw this in this way, then it has this very clear interpretation. I don't think a lot of people do that. Again, a lot of these interpretations are very psychoanalytic in origin. But anyway, they can be used for children and adults, just about for everyone. There's not necessarily a very clear prompt to give. It doesn't require verbal skills, so it's useful for a lot of pre-verbal children that have issues, people that are defensive and don't really want to show a lot, often are not aware of what they're showing us when they draw. So people are very defensive. Generally, there's a lack of validity and reliability. I've said that already. And the idea is, again, people, when they draw, they're going to draw things in a way that it reflects their unconscious material. It's especially useful, I find, for children. And when doing so, it brings an extra level of problems in that because children have different motor skills and different maturity, what they draw and how they draw it is going to be highly influenced by their developmental level. So in order to interpret a drawing, you have to know the child's developmental level and know what is appropriate. Is it appropriate for a 3-year-old to draw a nose in a person? Well, probably not. But you'd expect that in somebody that's older. Again, there are a ton of scoring systems. Usually it's a laundry list of things that you can that you can interpret and what they mean. Usually they're based on several factors that are listed here. So the content of the drawing. Is there a choice about what is drawn? For instance, in the kinetic family drawing where the children are asked to draw a family, it's very telling if they choose not to draw the father or if they choose not to draw a sibling, and you know that they have it. It's like, well, that's interesting. Any details that are not there that you would expect, like for instance I mentioned a nose or a mouth, or in people that have a little more motor skills, what if they don't draw hands on people? That's omission of details. Inclusion of details. Sometimes people add things that aren't expected. For instance, if they draw a house and they draw a chimney, that's considered to be an additional detail that they added to that. And then if they have smoke coming off the chimney, oh, you're just like have plenty of things to interpret right there. Jewelry, things like that. Quality of the drawing. So, is it very poorly done? Are there big gaps between different lines? Is it drawn very meticulously, carefully? Is it not? Something else is coloring or shading. Some people like giving colored pencils so that you can see the color. In general, just the shading. Another thing that you should look at is the size of the drawing. Is it really, really tiny in a corner, or is it huge and the ceiling for the house was too big and so the ceiling goes off the page? Usually, again, that could reflect a lot of things: impulsivity, poor planning. Also, the relative sizes of the parts. So if you ask them to draw their family and they draw their mom as this gigantic tyrant, like T-Rex, and then the dad as this little like mouse on the like comparatively sized, well, that says a lot about how they see their the people in their lives. Also, you can see the process of their drawing. Where do they start? Do they take a long time? Do they focus on the details? Do they not? And the last thing is the location. There's an entire set of interpretations. It has to do with whether the drawings are on the left side, on the right side, on the top, and the bottom. Are they centered? Things like that. Usually you give them something very simple, like I want you to draw a person. You give them a piece of paper, and I don't like giving colored pencils because it makes it take a long time. And then you say, oh, and then there's a standard list of possible. Well, there are lists of different things you can ask as follow-up questions. For instance, in the house, you could ask stuff like, well, who lives there? How old is the house? How do the people that live there are happy? Where is the house? Is it is it your house? Is it a house you know? Where's your room in the house? Stuff like that can actually give. Is it a happy house or a sad house? If the house had 3 wishes, what 3 wishes would the house have? If it's a tree, like is it alive or dead? Anyway, like there are standard follow-up questions, and I personally, when I look at people giving these drawings, I consider a test administration to be incomplete if no follow-up questions are asked. That's just my bias, not necessarily based on some authoritative source, except for the manual. The manual says you should. But few people actually use a manual for this. So now I'll talk a little bit briefly about the different projective drawings that you probably have encountered. The kinetic family drawing. Before I go into this, are there any questions about projective drawings in general?
I guess just in relation to how the exams may be questioning these tests, because there are standardizations, there aren't very specific guidelines for interpreting what exactly is drawn. Mm-hmm. How would we be asked about these tests?
So this question is about what types of questions you're likely to see in the comps for this.
Given lack of kind of hard and fast rules and facts.
Right. Chances are there probably won't be that many questions on these because there's nothing super standardized. I know in past years there would have been questions about like what can a transparency mean? It's highly unlikely. So just knowing the different ones and what they're supposed to be there for would probably be good enough. Are there any other questions? Oh, and also the other reason is not just because there aren't any scoring systems, but because if you look at scoring systems and you look at psychometric properties, yeah, they're not so great. So the kinetic family drawing, the prompt is draw a picture of your family doing something. It looks for family dynamics. You want to look at who's there, who isn't, what they're doing, how they're positioned, relative sizes, etc. House tree person is one of the ones that are most common. You know, pretty much you give them a piece of paper, you say, well, please draw a house, then you take it away. You do have to take it away so that they don't keep on making more additions to it. Then can you draw a tree? And then they draw a tree, you take it away, and then you ask them to draw a person. Usually what you do is after that's done, then you present them one by one and ask the follow-up questions. Oftentimes also like they can draw things that are not very clear about what they are. So like a certain like bizarre party hat, you want to be like, oh, what's on their head? You want to clarify things, you want to ask the follow-up questions, 3 wishes, who are they, etc. So the house tree person, usually you can, it's the way it's conceptualized is that the house represents how they see their environment. So are they very closed off? Is it a threatening place? Is it inviting? Is it uninviting? Sort of their external reality. Or their reality within sort of their lives. The tree usually represents how they see themselves, and the person is how they see other people. Again, how much this is super accurate, it depends on who you look at. Some people really like these. So for the house tree person, and you could probably say the same for others, some basic interpretations, for instance, just as examples of things that you found more often than not. So if things are positioned... That says right. It should be left. But anyway, positioning to the left can indicate... to the right can be like they're really anxious, aggressive. To the left, they can be impulsive. In general, if you look at the house, you look at their surroundings. Is there a ground? What sort of environment is it? Are there windows? Is there light? Are there curtains? The size... For the tree, common interpretations are about whether or not the tree is rotting, decayed, really big. If it has a hole in it, it's very empty. Some people say that certain type of fruit trees, such as pines or apple trees, are also indicative of regressive tendencies or childishness. For the person, you want to see what they're doing, if they're friendly, if they're smiling. So generally, kind of subjective.
Does the positioning take into account handedness?
If the position takes into consideration handedness, I'm not sure. I haven't seen that. Usually there are books or manuals that say if the shading of the lines is very thick, it means this. If the hands are to the front of their body, it means sexual concerns. And that's sort of the books and the information out there is sort of very open-ended. There's not that much. Another one I really like is a person in the rain. Usually I do this right after the house tree person. You say, well, now draw a person in the rain. And it's supposed to get at the coping skills and resources that they have. Is it raining only on them? Is it raining everywhere? Do they have an umbrella? Are they happy? So rain being sort of projected as problems, and you can see their ability to cope with it. So that's all I have about sort of projective drawings and projective tests in general.